Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm Katrina Fox, and my guest today is Ondine Sherman. Ondine is the co-founder and managing director of Voiceless, the Animal Protection Institute in Australia. She's also a prolific author. She has got some non-fiction books for young adults in her Animal Allies series. She's also got a brand new book out called Vegan Living, which covers every aspect of veganism. And she also wrote a memoir about her journey about searching for a cure for her twin son's rare medical condition and the journey to love and acceptance. So I'm really delighted to dive into this conversation. Ondine, it's so lovely to see you, to have you here today.
Lovely to see you too, and thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. So look, I would love to know a little bit about you growing up, because you come from a really quite an interesting family. So your parents, I think, were brought up in a Jewish community in South Africa. Then they moved to Australia many, many years ago. Your father, Brian, is a renowned philanthropist, became a super successful businessman in funds management. And your mum, Jean, is an amazing art curator and collector. And they're quite quirky in a way, and I mean that in a very loving way. Your parents, like your dad is like super successful businessman and philanthropist, and then your mum is like quite creative and maybe a little eccentric, if we say that. And I've met her and she's great. So I think I'm curious, how did that impact on you when you were growing up, and how have your parents influenced who you are?
Yeah, well, interesting question. I mean, I have a teenage daughter, and she's been letting me know the last few years that we have a really weird family. And it's not just my parents, but there's a lot of weird things about our family. But yeah, growing up, I mean, I was thinking a lot about this when I was writing my memoir, just the focus, which, when you're growing up, you think everything's normal pretty much because you can't really compare your life to other people's. But we really did have a big focus on social justice in our home. My parents left South Africa because of ideological reasons. They didn't agree with the apartheid regime, and they left a very comfortable life there. And so that was, I guess, the kind of background to it was that, values and issues of justice and issues of being, trying to be a good people and doing the right thing. Meanwhile, my dad was, busy flying around the world, becoming a kind of superstar financial manager. And, thanks to his kind of financial creativity, I guess, and being a real leader in that area, I've been able to today, work on things that I'm passionate about, because, I'm very lucky to have that financial base that has all come from him. So he was overseas a lot, doing road shows in the US and Asia, and my mum was, is very, very passionate about her careers and her career goals, and she's a real workaholic. So she was very busy achieving her dreams. And she's, was an academic, and then she moved over into the visual arts. So yeah, it was, I guess, an unusual home. But, it's hard to know what's nurture or nature, but I knew from a very, very young age that I was passionate about animals, and animals is what I wanted to do with my life, and try and save them and protect them. I'm not sure how much of that can be attributed to my home. It's actually a question I'm really interested in, or what part of that is just a unique thing that some people have, that they just are born with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I get that, because I feel the same about you. Because I mean, I grew up very different, just in a working class family just outside South London, and like we had a cat, and my cat Kitty was my best friend at one point. So maybe there was that natural affinity, but other than that, it's hard to know kind of where it.
Where it sprung up from.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, I know what you said, like, about, how your dad was away a lot and doing business, and your mum was, an academic, then into the arts. Did that sort of mod, because, there's kind of an argument. People say, oh, well, it's bad, bad, you know, if parents aren't around. And then there's another argument, but no, it's like actually showing your children, you know, and modeling that as parents, that you can, you know, achieve your dreams is a positive thing. So did you get kind of that from your parents, like just seeing them, oh, okay, they're doing all these cool things? Did that kind of show to you that, oh, I can do that, rather than, oh, my mum and dad aren't around a lot?
Right. Yeah, good question. Probably as a kid, you know, I'd have a kind of joke with my mum, and, you know, that if only she'd be home baking cakes and, you know, like doing
You can't
normal
imagine
mum
your mum doing
things.
that.
So I was kind of a bit like, you know, complained about that a little bit. But I think growing up, you know, and coming in, you know, into adulthood, I more and more appreciated that she has passions and interests, and, you know, and I feel that we're all, you know, we all have gifts that we should bring to the world, that we have to bring to the world, and that might be, you know, being full time with your kids, and being that more traditional stay at home mum. Um, and I have many friends and family who do that, and that's wonderful. But I think, like, you know, I believe that's a choice. Like, whatever you feel, I think living your best life as a mother and as a parent is the way to give to your children. Because if you're unhappy being a full-time mother, or you're unhappy being a full-time, you know, career person, then that's more negative for your kids than deciding everybody has to be this and everybody has to be that. I really think we're all so different, have such different characters and such different things that drive us, and we need to kind of follow our hearts and our intuition, and yeah, and be kind of full authentic, you know, holistic people in the world.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. So I'd like to take you to the time, and I know you've covered this in your memoir, and I highly recommend people read Ondine's memoir, which is absolutely amazing. It's called The Miracle of Love, a mother's story of grief, hope, and acceptance. So take us back to that time. You were running Voiceless in Australia. You're married. You already had a daughter. You know, life was pretty good. You find out you're pregnant, and then, if I'm right, it was when you were pregnant you found out that your twin sons had a rare medical condition that meant that it was highly unlikely they would be able to walk or talk properly. So for someone who's kind of got almost like, you know, from the outside, it might have almost looked like the perfect life, and then this happens. And like you said, you know, you said, you know, your father, Brian, you know, you're financially able, you know, in a position where you could kind of do anything you want, and then suddenly, wham, this hits you. What went through your mind? Talk us through that time. Like, what were you feeling? What were your reactions when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very, very, very difficult time, and by time I mean, you know, years of my life and our life. We actually found out, or only got the first signs that there was anything wrong when they were about 6 months old. So yeah, my pregnancy, I had a kind of like a high risk pregnancy because they were identical twins, and that's considered high risk. Um, and I was, you know, very well looked after in the medical system, and I had weekly or, you know, fortnightly scans and checks, and everything was looking good. And yeah, once we kind of got it took us about a year and a half to get a diagnosis, because nobody could understand what was going on. We went from doctor to specialist to test to, you know, MRIs and EEGs and spinal taps. We did everything under the sun, and nobody had an answer. And my dad, who, as as we know, is a real go-getter and kind of like a bulldog when he gets onto something. He made it his life's mission. He put everything else aside and was like, I'm finding an answer to this. Like the vast majority of people who have children with rare genetic disorders, or who have, you know, disabilities, don't get diagnosed. So, you know, you think in our current medical, you know, with all the amazing medicine we have these days, you think there's answers to everything. But unfortunately, I learned, you know, as many others do, is that, like, usually there's not an answer. So my dad and my husband Gerard kind of started on this worldwide search. to find a diagnosis, and they went, used every possible contact around the world. It ended up being some guy who my dad had met in a health ranch in Arizona years back. He sent like a whole portfolio of what the symptoms were. And this guy who knew somebody in the hospital, anyway, we found a diagnosis, and, unfortunately, or at the time, it was very, difficult to come to terms with the fact that it was such a terrible diagnosis and the prospects weren't good.
What were they? What did they tell you? That you could expect?
Well, it was still so rare. At that time, there were only about 50 children in the world, I think, who had been diagnosed. Today, there's about 250 or so. So it's called like an ultra rare disease. And from what they knew, you could expect that, they would never be able to walk. They would never be able to, communicate verbally, that there was a lot of health issues with like an overabundance of like thyroid hormones in the blood that wasn't good for one's organs. So I was trying to push all that aside, and we were in a kind of we started in a kind of like a very intense cycle of therapies, because it's all about early intervention. And there's a lot of pressure on parents in those initial years, like get it all in there and get the brain sorted out, because, after 7 years, that's it, like nothing more can be done. That's not now understood to be the case. It's not so rigid. But at the time, yeah, there was a huge amount of pressure. So I took on all the kind of therapy roles of, coordinating and all the activities. And my husband took on all the medical side of looking for a cure, and that involved, a huge amount of searching and, networking and medical discussions. And I hated that, and I actually still really don't like that. So he does all the medical stuff, I do all the therapy stuff, and we kind of divided our worlds in that way, which worked for us, and allowed me to kind of, in a way, just focus on them as kids and being their mum, and not on them as being kind of like medical specimens, which is kind of where you are kind of forced to go when you have a child with complex needs, is that you are constantly seeing them through the eyes of doctors and medical practitioners as little, creatures to be cured and fixed and so on. And, I came to the point where, through a long personal journey that I chart in the book of, just accepting and loving them exactly as they are, and not trying to cure them anymore.
But that's an interesting one. Can we get back to that into it, because that about how you were feeling emotionally through that, because obviously you were kind of, it sounds like you were go like in that search for cure, to kind of to fix, I guess, and like you say, it's kind of, they became like almost like a project, I guess, by the sound of it. What were you going through emotionally? Like, did you not have time initially at the beginning? I'm just curious about what you went through emotionally and how you kind of handled that.
I think emotionally, I was just in repression and denial for many years. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't even, I've journaled all my life. I stopped journaling for years. I stopped reading. I stopped listening to music. I just, I was go. All I wanted to do was fix them, and it felt like there was, the timer was on, and we were running out of time. So that was, I was in a state of really high stress and anxiety and fear, and I came to a point where, I had gone back to work at Voiceless, because I'd taken some time off, for the pregnancy and birth, and I'd gone back to the office. And I remember sitting in, a meeting, what should have been a really interesting meeting about some research into factory farming, and, it's kind of my field of work and my field of interest. And I just I couldn't even hear what the person was saying. Like, all I was thinking about was my kids. And I realized, I can't multitask like this anymore. So I took it was like a very emotionally distressing decision of going on a sabbatical from Voiceless. I said, I can't focus, you know. All I want to do is be there for my boys. And my daughter as well, who was little and, you know, such a sweetie pie and needed me too. So yeah, so I took a break from Voiceless, and initially I thought there was a suggestion by somebody to write like a book about Voiceless and about the beginnings and why my dad and I started. And I thought, oh, maybe I could do that just quietly, you know, in my own time. But I realized that no, what I needed to write was all my emotional, you know, experiences and the journey I was going through. And writing is really what I feel like saved me in many ways. It's called bibliotherapy.
Oh, really?
You
Oh, there's a
know,
name for it. I
yeah,
hadn't heard of that. Hadn't
yeah.
heard of
It's
that.
and writing is
Oh.
extremely powerful in just processing. It's kind of quite magical in
Did you
processing one's
handwrite or
emotions.
did you type?
I have both. So I had
Okay.
notebooks with me wherever I went. I did all my work pretty much out of the house. So I was still doing all the therapies and practicing all the, you know, therapies with the boys and taking them to appointments and picking up my daughter and all that kind of stuff. But every free moment I got, I would kind of skip off to a cafe with my laptop and my notebook, and I would just, you know, journal and then write and journal and then write. And eventually I just had a lot of words. And then I
So what,
started
yeah.
getting into writing, and the craft of writing was the next step.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was the journey? Can you take us through the journey of you did that, you got the diagnosis, you were go, trying to find go, and then you've gotten to that stage like you just mentioned, you see them as perfect, and you came to that, as you say in the memoir, to acceptance and a miracle. And obviously, you know, a lot of the times when we're in the midst of a challenge or in the midst of a trauma or pain, it can be hard to see the gift, you know, and sometimes people, you know, especially if they say it when you're going through it, oh, you know, you'll find the gift in it, you want to kind of slap them. But then, you know, as time goes by and you look back, you can sometimes see that, okay, I can see what the gift was in that. And as you say, it was a miracle. Can you talk us through at what point did you get to that? Like, what did you have to go in order to get to that point? Because a lot of people, I think, in your position, they might be going through all kinds of things like guilt, or, you know, what might it look like? What will people think? You know, I haven't got the perfect. Do you know what I mean? There can be all that kind of thing, and then people can feel shame about what they're feeling. So I'm just curious how you got to that real acceptance.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of work, I must say. I've worked harder than I had ever worked in my life, in terms of, you know, the process of writing, of going to therapy, of reading a lot of other people's memoirs and experiences and journeys. I started yoga. I started, you know, long walks. What else did I do? You know, I read a lot about spirituality and about religion, and not that I was religious at all before, but I was just searching. I went through a process of searching, and you know, I don't know, something changed during that time. And I mean, whenever I had been with Dov and Lev, my boys, like I was always, they were kind of like a therapy for me being with them. It was when I wasn't with them that I was anxious and worrying about them. But being with them is the most like grounding, centering, like, you know, very nurturing experience, because they're such beautiful souls, the two of them. So I just came to appreciate that more and more. And yes, I guess my other big thing that I really consciously worked on was staying in the present. And it sounds kind of cheesy, and, you know, it's been said a million times, but all pretty much all my fears and anxieties were coming from, you know, jumping into future scenarios. What's going to happen when they're in wheelchairs? What's going to happen when they're, you know, adults? What's going to happen if I hurt my back, and if I this, and, you know, like, how will my daughter manage it? Like, the I think, as humans, that's our one fault, is we're constantly skipping ahead and trying to control and plan for the future. So I really worked on bringing myself back into just the present, going, here I am, here they are, we're happy, they're beautiful children. My daughter's, beautiful girl. Like, I have a home and a husband and people who love me and I love, and what else can you want? Like that was the perfection part. Like, my life was still perfect. It
I
was
love that.
other people's projections onto me. That was also
Yes.
something that I had to really actively manage, because I feel like in Australia in particular, there is a lot of just a lot of shame around disability, and people don't see disabled people, and they're kind of outsourced and pushed. Yeah, I felt like the atmosphere wasn't wasn't great and had a lot of work to be done. And I think there is changes. People are working on changing things, and there's progression there. But that was another big learning for me, was to stop giving a F about what other people thought and what other people said and what they were saying behind my back and yada, 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 and their judgments and, what I imagined were their
Yes.
judgments.
Yeah.
So that's a great life lesson to learn.
Definitely. I think there's a little adage I heard someone say, put it in a nutshell. It's like, other people's opinions are none of my business, or so, other people's
Yeah.
opinions about me are none of my business, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that
No,
you shared that.
exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, I suppose at the other end of the scale, now your dad Brian is living with Parkinson's, and he's written his own, again, another powerful memoir on that. How is that impacting you, and have you drawn anything from your experiences going through what you did with Dov and Lev to be able to handle seeing your father live? And I know my birth father has got Parkinson's as well. He's in New York, and just seeing someone go from being, I only found him back in 2012, seeing someone quite vibrant to just gradually becoming, I guess, more and more disabled, not able to live the way that they would like.
Yeah.
How are you handling that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a difficult journey as well. He's been, from the first signs that something was going on with him, it's probably about 10 years ago now. So it's been a kind of a long, slow road. For many, many years, none of us knew what was going on, because he wasn't diagnosed with Parkinson's. And he was on, a raft of like medications for all different kinds of things that were not helping him, were actually harming him. So there was a lot of, stress in the family, and, and also what the difference is, I guess, between him and my boys is, my boys, touch wood, they're not suffering, they're happy kids. Whereas my dad has really been suffering, for many years, because you just feel terrible when you have I guess Parkinson's is a umbrella term for a lot of different symptoms, but the symptoms that he has, he's just feeling terrible on a daily basis. But he's a real trooper and a real fighter, and he hasn't let it stop him, just being strong, and yeah, he's amazing. And I guess it was just, another reminder that we have no control about what is going to fall into our laps in life. We've just discovered it this year with the coronavirus. The only thing we can control is our own responses and our own attitudes and our own, what we bring into the world ourselves. So maybe I don't know, better prepared than some to understand that this is life. There's the dark and the light, and you got to just go ahead and deal with it the best you can.
Yeah,
But I mean,
absolutely.
having said that, my dad, he's such a sweet guy, and I feel very grateful, and really lucky that as he's gone through all this physical and emotional pain, that it hasn't turned him into a nasty, bitter or resentful person. He's just a lovely person to be with, and I still love talking to him and being with him. So I still feel, that I have him in that sense.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I really
Sure.
appreciate that. Now, you co-founded with Brian the Voiceless Animal Protection Institute. You've written the Animal Allies series of children's books, which are wonderful. And of course, your brand new book is Vegan Living, which is about all aspects of veganism. It's a very comprehensive guide. I think you've really kind of knocked it out of the park with that, to kind of make it so accessible for anyone interested in veganism, to cover off all the different aspects. So congratulations on that. Now, I know that you're vegan, but not everyone in your family is vegan. So I'm curious, how do you navigate that, and what tips have you got for other people who might find themselves in a similar situation? It's one of the biggest things, I think, when people go vegan, and then, we kind of hope that everyone we know, all our family, all our friends, or like colleagues, are going to go, oh yeah, okay, I'll do it too. And it doesn't always happen that way. So what advice can you give us on how you've navigated it, and any tips?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. Because, as one knows, if one's vegan, you've learned all this horrific information about what animals are subjected to in our world. And you feel such deep pain about the suffering they're going through. And you know that that suffering is not necessary, that we can live healthy, wonderful lives without having, 70, 75 billion animals in factory farms, pretty much. And it's quite perplexing why other people don't seem to understand, like, that they shouldn't be buying into this, animal torture, really. But that's the case. I mean, the vast majority of people who I love and otherwise respect and care about aren't vegan. And you have to learn to come to terms with that. Otherwise, I feel the option is either to cut everybody off in your life and to just surround yourself only with vegans and like-minded people. Or the other option is to, learn some skills that can allow you to live and love the people that you previously lived and loved with, and understand that that it's not an indictment on their character, because and I guess some of the tricks that I do with myself is I think of issues that I care about but I don't necessarily act upon in my life. One that would come to mind is, the fast fashion industry and all the terrible conditions that workers, in developing countries go through, and the exploitation and the environmental, disaster that the fashion industry causes. And yet, from time to time I go in and buy, clothes in the big chains that are all taking part in those things that I disagree with. Why I do that is the same reasons that I think the people, my friends and family, still go out and buy, animal products. It's that it's easier. We're used to it. It's everybody else does it. It's very hard to prioritize lots of things in your life. I mean, I care about a lot of different issues. If I was going to prioritize all of them, I would find it quite challenging to get through the day, Sometimes I don't recycle 100%. And I have that, moment of guilt if I'm out and I have a plastic water bottle, which I shouldn't be having in the first place, and I put it in a bin that's not recyclable. I feel terrible, but I still do it. So I remind myself that I am not perfect, and as is other people are not perfect. And also that they're going on their own journey, and maybe they're passionate about something, or maybe it's a time in their life where they just can't take on something as, as holistic as a vegan lifestyle. And I definitely can apply that to my own life as well, because I was vegetarian and wanted to go vegan for many years, but because of all the drama with my kids and all the emotional stress I was going through, I couldn't add it to my to-do list of working out how to do it in a way that was, good and healthy. So I do have, empathy for people. And I remind myself of that. Like some people are just going through hard times and they just can't do it now. But that doesn't mean in 5 years or in 15 years, that's not going to circle back and they'll be like, okay, I'm ready now. It's something I do believe in. And now I'm going to, take that next step. So just, I think, being patient and trying not to be judgmental, understanding that we're all human, and, eating meat and eating dairy is the normal way of the world, unfortunately, in still today. And so, you have to be swimming upstream if you want to, if you want to go vegan, even though it's, as I say in my book, and we all know it's a wonderful life, and it's not that hard, but it's still, it's not the common lifestyle.
Yet. But I think books like yours and, all the changes we're seeing, we're starting to get there. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you. I think it is. It's like, sometimes it can be quite true. And I think sometimes we don't often admit this as activists, whatever kind of type of cause that you're interested in. Sometimes, like we'll go, right, I'm a women's rights activist, or LGBTIQ or animal rights, and to try and do everything, particularly at the same level or equally, you can kind of burn yourself out. But I don't think people necessarily admit that. You know what I mean? They don't want to admit that you care more about a particular cause than another. It's somehow seen as not politically correct, but it's kind of realistic. So I think you're right to acknowledge that we're not perfect, and that we might be doing great things in one area and not so great in another. And I guess, the more we need more kind of collaborations, more coalitions to understand issues, and to just make it as easy as possible for people to make an ethical choice, whether it's food, fashion, and things like that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your tips.
Yeah, I think also what would be better is if there was less judgment within the vegan community about what makes somebody vegan. I mean, it's something that I've thought about a lot, in terms of, like, to be 100% vegan, we all know is next to impossible, just with the amount of animal products that are in every invisible thing in our society, from our, sugar to the paint on our walls, to the glue, to the medications. Like, it's very hard to be 100%. Which percentage constitutes someone being vegan? Is it 98% or 92% or 85%? And who's measuring that, and who's policing that? And I would argue that we should be a little bit more relaxed when someone wants to claim the vegan identity, but they once a year eat a piece of cake that has egg in it. Then they're not going to be, like, thrown out of the vegan camp and say, you're a hypocrite and you're not vegan and you're lying. I don't think that's helping the animals. I think if we were going to embrace more people into it, we would be, able to grow even more. Because people get scared off by that. And the interviews I did researching this book, one of the biggest themes that came out of it when I was speaking to people was, the judgment and the policing of being vegan, and how that's so off-putting and so stressful, and it's a reason that people don't want to do it.
Fair point. Yeah, for sure. Just want to give a little shout out, because I can see we've got Timothy who's just commented, I'm watching from Uganda. That's amazing. Hello, Timothy. Thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful. So now, as well as being obviously the managing director of Voiceless, you're also director of other NGOs, including the Sherman Foundation. So I'm curious, what does leadership mean to you, and what style of leader are you?
I mean, it's hard to say what I would feel like I'd want to ask other people what style I am. I would imagine that my Voiceless team would say I'm pretty easygoing as a leader. I'm definitely not a perfectionist. I mean, in my character, and I don't micromanage. What I try to do is, is basically keep everybody on track and working towards our goals and supporting and encouraging, people along the way, and also hopefully bringing in new ideas and new kind of thoughts into whatever I'm working on, by reading widely and watching lots of different things, and being kind of open and allowing some creativity into the process. And I certainly don't like for myself to be kind of repeating things ad nauseum. Like, we have this program and we do it every year in the same way, and it has to be done this way and not that way. I'm more kind of like, yeah, let's see how, what's working, how we can improve things, and happy to hear other ideas. So I hope that's the kind of leader I am. I definitely like leading. I really enjoy
What does
that
leadership
role.
mean to you? How would you define it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it allows me to really to create a vision. Like, there's something that for example, in Voiceless, we've, changed strategies, really focusing on youth education now. So I had this vision of, Voiceless working in schools and with curriculum, and really getting animal protection messages, out to the young change makers of the future and the young leaders. And so I guess leadership means, bringing together everything and everybody that is going to allow that to happen in a way that is, like, hopefully positive and a great experience for them as well as for me, that can fulfill, this vision that I have, and hopefully they share and can, even add to and expand on. So I guess it's a creative endeavor in a way, rather than focusing on, managing. Like, the management side is my least favorite side. I like to, be striving towards the creation and the achievement of a goal that is about doing something good in the world.
Nice. I love it. What do you love most about yourself?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think these days I really love that I can do lots of different things that I love, which includes having all my animals in the house. I've got 3 dogs and 2 cats and some chickens and a rabbit. And
any particular qualities about you that you love about yourself?
Yeah, I like that I'm easygoing and creative, and have a sense of humor, and that when I set something that I'd really love to do, then I usually don't give up until I do it. So I appreciate that I think that came from my parents. They're very goal orientated, arguably too goal orientated, but yeah, they're definitely about, you set something and you work towards it. But I like about myself that I'm trying to do that in a way that's also nourishing for me and doesn't, bleed me dry along the way and cause, me to be, just overly exhausted. So that self-care, I think, is so important.
Absolutely. So just final question then, what would you say, any kind of key lesson that you've learned, because you've had such an interesting life today, what would be maybe one key lesson you've learned, or any kind of little nugget of wisdom that you would like to pass on to other vegan women leaders?
One of my key lessons that I've learned, just getting older and going through all these experiences, is that, things can be put to the side and you can do them later. You don't have to do everything you want and everything you imagine all at the same time. I think that comes in, when you're parenting as well and trying to work and trying to have a career. Someone once said to me, like, it's not about doing everything all at once. It's doing things one at a time. So, for example, when I took my sabbatical from Voiceless, I felt like, oh my God, this is such a failure, that I need to have a break. But now I see it as, wow, I was always going to come back to that. Like I knew I would come back to Voiceless, and I knew, that I would come back to many things that I was passionate about. But sometimes life takes you in one direction or the other, and you kind of have to go with the flow, knowing that that there's time and to be kind to yourself and not to berate yourself and feel bad if you're not achieving everything you want to achieve all at once. So I think that's some wisdom that comes with age, maybe.
That is really good. I really love that. I think I probably needed to hear that today, actually. It can be kind of tempting. I'm like, I'm trying to juggle all these things, but you're right. It's like, I think that's really good advice. I absolutely love that. It's been so lovely speaking with you, Ondine. If you'd like to check out Ondine's work, do go to the website ondinesherman.com. You can find out all about Ondine's work and her many different books. And you can find out more about Voiceless at voiceless.org.au. It's been so lovely speaking with you, Ondine.
Thank you
very much for joining me. It's been great. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.